Our MC Shouta, who is the sole survivor of a plane crash, wanders around the forest looking for water to drink. Apparently, he had lost his parents in the plane crash as well. When his body eventually gives in and he begins to lose consciousness, a special forces soldier with an eye patch shows up and asks him if he wants to live. When he replies that he does, the man then makes it clear that he's going to face a rigorous life of battle that he'd regret not dying here. While the man tries to rescue him, his men try to stop him, stating that they're in the middle of a mission and that picking up trash like him would only get in the way. But the man gets furious and yells at them, telling them he doesn't take orders from people weaker than him. That was how Guzu the captain, became Shouta's adoptive father. When they return to the base, Guzu hands Shouta a revolver and tells him it's his now. He explains to Shouta that he has to both live with it and die with it, but he knows that dying is still a long way off for him. Guzu gets him some food and water and tells him that when he's done eating, he will become a warrior, taking him by surprise. After the meal, Guzu reveals his plan to train Shouta relentlessly and turn him into a full-fledged warrior just within 5 years. Guzu is a combat professional conducting guerrilla operations worldwide. Just like he said, Guzu begins putting Shouta through various rigorous training sessions. He is taught martial arts and how to handle all kinds of weapons as well. Before he knew it, he had become so strong that no one in the unit dared to treat him like trash anymore. One day, during training with his old man, Shouta takes down a wild boar with a single sniper shot and eventually brings it back to the base. Learning about his plight, the rest of the men in the unit marvel at his undeniable talent, as he's only 10 years old. Some even remark that he might actually have more talent than the captain, who is rumored to be able to shoot a deer's right eye from a kilometer away. 12 years later, in an enemy camp, the ops are seen talking about the appearance of a certain dangerous mercenary called Crimson. According to them, Crimson is rumored to be a master sniper who can shoot the left eye of a mosquito from 2 kilometers away. With someone like that against them, they realize they might be cooked. One of the recruits, who doesn't believe such a thing is possible, disagrees with the rumor, but then the unexpected happens. A sniper bullet gets lodged into his skull from nowhere, driving the whole camp into pandemonium. Apparently, they happen to be deep inside their army territory, so they believe there should be no way for an enemy to infiltrate. All of a sudden, another shot is taken, and this time the general gets killed. Meanwhile, Crimson, who happens to be Shouta, is seen having a good time on a distant skyscraper as he wipes out the entire camp. He had been given the mission to kill the general and cause the unit maximum damage for 50,000 euros. When he decides to head back to report to his old man, a nearby enemy unit spots him and starts charging at him immediately. He's then forced to bring out his revolver to take care of them. Seeing the revolver, the men mock him, calling him a novice, but little do they know the 3 advantages that the revolver has over other weapons. Firstly, it doesn't jam. Secondly, it can use large caliber bullets with high power penetration. And thirdly, it has received the divine protection of the goddess of the battlefield. With just 3 shots, Shouta asserts his dominance and wipes out the entire unit. He's then rescued from the scene by Guzu with a chopper. On the chopper, Guzu congratulates him for killing his 3rd general in the war, but announces that he has a new mission where Shouta is expected to go to Japan. As expected, Shouta assumes that it's probably an assassination mission involving the prime minister or someone else of a high caliber. But the old man interrupts, telling him he's going to be teaching in a prestigious high school. Since Shouta can fluently speak 5 languages, Guzu tells him his mission will be to infiltrate the school as an English teacher. A short while later, a fake ID is prepared where he's given an undercover name. He then boards the plane to Japan, wondering what kind of obstacles he'll meet this time. Arriving in Japan, Shouta stops by to get some food at a convenience store. He's pretty impressed by the taste, hygienic packaging, and most importantly, the cheap cost. But what strikes his attention the most is how peaceful the place appears to be. Looking around, all he sees are people going on dates, picnics, or just having fun in general. He then wonders what mission could be waiting for him in such a peaceful country. After eating, Shouta heads to the safe house that was prepared for him. Getting to high-class residential area, he finds his apartment within a skyscraper and is impressed with the looks. The apartment also happens to be close to the school he has been sent to teach at. When he gets in, Shouta notices something unusual, but decides to sit down anyway. Shortly after, a man comes charging at him from behind with a knife. Thanks to his sharp observation skills, Shouta can detect him on time. He picks a bottle of water and throws it at the man to disrupt his field of vision. He then punches him straight in the face to the man's surprise. Not relenting, the man still attempts a full swing, but Shouta evades it easily and knocks off the knife. Seeing his raw physical abilities in person, the man confirms for a fact that he's the well-rumored Crimson. Shouta then grabs the man by the throat, asking who he is. The man surrenders himself easily, stating that he must have overestimated himself to think he could beat the legendary Crimson alone. Shouta, feeling cocky, tells him he should come with a team of 5 next time. All of a sudden, a young lady shows up behind him with a pistol aimed at his head, ordering him not to move. Shouta, who doesn't seem the least bit surprised, just casually tells her the hammer is not cocked, causing her to get flustered. He then turns around and grabs the cylinder in an instant, telling her to be more careful next time. The lady thanks him for the tip, but tells him she would be needing it as all they're here to do is provide rear support for him. They then officially introduce themselves as Ulfheim and Maylene. Ulfheim will be infiltrating the academy as an art teacher to provide support to Shouta and help him get settled into the culture. Maylene, however, will be infiltrating as one of the students to equally render support from the shadows. Shouta then reveals that he had sensed their presence the moment he walked in and had just waited to see what they were made up of. He asks if they purposely made their attack cheap just to check him out, but the duo's spirits get shattered as they were really trying their best. When they ask if he has any questions, Shouta asks how Maylene thinks she can pull off a teenager look when she's clearly in her 20s, pissing her off in the process. She then explains that since her skin is flawlessly smooth, she wouldn't really stand out in the midst of the Japanese high school girls. Ulfheim cuts in, telling her to stop glazing herself, and she ends up snapping again. The duo then later decides to brief Shouta about the mission. The goal is to infiltrate the academy to protect Sakurako Kujo, the daughter of the president of a global military corporation, who attends the school. It happens to be a hidden Japanese military corporation that is known for developing war equipment from rockets down to ammunition. The corporation is said to be using neighboring countries as detours to evade the country's arms export principles, which wasn't really an issue as long as it was limited to the West. But they received reports that President Kujo had started funneling the products to communist countries, which would eventually lead to world destruction. Since organizations from all over the world are now interested, they are most likely going to try to use his daughter as leverage on him. That's why someone as skilled as Shouta was hired to monitor and guard her from these unknown people. Shouta is expected to also sweet-talk Sakurako to get information about the arms export so he can outsmart the other forces, but that would be a serious problem, as bro has zero riz. Maylene then comments that his majestic and nonchalant looks should be able to make her fall for him naturally. The following day, following the intel he has received about the target, Shouta gets on a bus, where he meets Sakurako. When the bus takes off, Shouta notices Sakurako acting strangely, so he assumes that she's probably running a fever, or some kind of virus. When he communicates with the rest of the team through this hidden communication device, asking if he's to send her back home, they point out that he's not in any position to even do that to a stranger. Ulfheim, who is monitoring the whole incident with a surveillance drone, points out that rather than fever, Sakurako is just embarrassed. Apparently, she's being molested by a much older, perverted man from behind in the bus. Shouta then realizes that this is probably part of his guard duty as well. After cupping enough of her dump truck, the man, however, decides to take things further by groping her milkers. So Shouta intervenes. Like the knight in shining armor Sakurako wished for, Shouta grabs the man's arm and twists it till it almost gets to a breaking point, causing him to scream in pain. After reprimanding the man, Sakurako thanks Shouta for helping her out, and he brushes it off easily. He then tells her she needs to fight back, as she won't get help like that on a battlefield. Hearing his corny sentence construction, Ulfheim and Maylene wonder if Shouta has really never spoken to a girl before. Shortly after, the bus makes a brief stop, so the man storms out and starts running away. Not wanting him to escape, Shouta chases after him and eventually catches up to him in an abandoned alley. While the man realizes he can't run anymore, he brings out a stun gun and threatens to use it on Shouta if he comes any closer. To his surprise, Shouta grabs his hand before he realizes it and slams him into the ground in less than a second. He then tells Ulfheim to contact the police. Ulfheim seems against the idea, as they're meant to be undercover, but when Shouta reminds him that he's an assassin, he agrees to it. After taking care of the issue, Shouta arrives at the school and realizes how much time has passed. Since he had been delayed intensely by the police after handing over the molester, there was nothing he could do about it. Ulfheim instructs him to report to the principal immediately, but is completely blown away when he finds out that Shouta doesn't even know what a principal is. Since he was raised by South American guerrillas, he never attended anything resembling a school. However, Maylene, who is already settled in her class, explains through her own discrete communication device that a principal is like a colonel in the school setting. Hearing that, Shouta realizes how important such a person must be. He heads over to the office immediately to introduce himself officially. When he gets there, he's quite surprised as the person he meets doesn't seem like a colonel in any way. The principal welcomes him warmly and remarks on his good looks. While Shouta tries to figure out what skills the principal specializes in, the old man reaches into his breast pocket for something. Shouta immediately assumes the worst, so he reaches for his gun as well. Thankfully, Ulfheim and Maylene can stop him in time from causing huge havoc. From his pocket, the principal brings out a Japanese business card, which he hands over. Shouta accepts the business card wholeheartedly as the principal introduces himself officially to him. He equally introduces himself and apologizes for coming late, but the principal tells him not to worry about it. Shouta is quite surprised at the old man's benevolence because back in the military, an offense that grave would lead to a court-martial. The old man then explains that he received a report from the police about the situation he handled, so he commends him for his brave act. He then assigns Shouta as the assistant homeroom teacher for Class 2B, which Sakurako and Mylene happen to be attending. While leaving the office, Shouta accidentally refers to the principal as Colonel, taking the old man completely by surprise. On his way to the classroom, Ulfheim is forced to confirm that the only weapon on Shouta is his revolver. When Shouta finally arrives at the class entrance, Mylene instructs him to come in and ensure he acts like a teacher. Shouta then opens the door and prepares to face an obstacle he has never faced before: students. Walking into the classroom, Shouta draws the attention of the students for so many reasons. While the girls fawn over his aura and good looks, the boys, however, are visibly disappointed because the teacher turned out to be a man. The girls immediately start bombarding him with questions ranging from his favorite food down to the kinds of women he dates. Mylene knew Shouta was going to be popular with the students, but even she didn't expect this level of attention. Thankfully, Sakurako, the target, happens to be among the girls fawning over him. When Mylene finds out, she discreetly communicates about it, telling him to find a way to use it to their advantage. But before then, Shouta still has to introduce himself to the students. Facing the students, Shouta talks with a very calm voice, introducing himself as their assistant homeroom teacher and new English teacher. He also specifically mentions that he can speak 5 different languages, asking whoever is interested in learning to come see him during break time. As expected, the girls give in to his charm, openly expressing how much they like him. Meanwhile, a male student who happens to be infatuated with Sakurako is seen beaming with jealousy at the sight of her blushing at the new hot teacher. The homeroom teacher seems quite impressed by his qualifications as well. When she asks what his hobbies are, Shouta thinks about sniping, but he knows he can't say it. He then states that his main hobby is weight training, striking the students' interests even more. However, one particular chopped male student burns with so much hatred and jealousy. Apparently, he had told his classmates his hobby is weight training as well, but they only laughed at him. Seeing them give a different kind of reaction to the attractive teacher becomes too unbearable for him to take. He wraps a huge piece of paper and throws it at the professor with immense force, determined to make him lose some aura points. To his surprise, Shouta, who had already turned around, catches the paper just before it touches the back of his head. He then casually drops it in the trash can, making the girls trip even harder. During the break period, the girls scatter around the school in search of Shouta but can't seem to find him anywhere. Like the other students, Sakurako also wants to talk to Shouta, but for some more personal matters. When Mylene finds out about this, she contacts Ulfheim, asking to know if he has surveillance on Shouta, as she equally can't find him. After searching for a while, Ulfheim finds him, but not in a peaceful condition, so he alerts Mylene about it. Both of them then rush to the location to find out what is going on. Meanwhile, behind one of the buildings in the school, Shouta meets up with one of the students, who had invited him out to discuss matters about Sakurako. Seeing the student with a baseball bat, he gets confused and asks if the student is in the baseball club. Pissed, the student replies that he's in the go-home club. Clueless as ever, Shouta gets even more confused as he asks if such a club really exists, causing the student to lose more patience. The student then tells him he doesn't like him because of the way Sakurako looks at him, mesmerized. Shouta replies that he doesn't know how she sees him, but he'll be taking his leave as he has no intentions of playing baseball. Just like that, the student snaps and charges at him with the bat, openly declaring his intentions of bashing Shouta's head in. When he takes the first swing, Shouta dodges it easily and tells him he's out of range. The student gets furious and takes a couple more swings, but Shouta keeps lecturing him on how to swing properly as he evades them. He eventually gets tired of playing around, so he knocks the student out with a gentle palm to his forehead. Ulfheim and Mylene then arrive at the area and are shocked to see that, apart from the previous roller coaster of events, Shouta has also beaten up a student on his first day. Shortly after beating up the student, Shouta carries him on his shoulders to the school infirmary. Walking through the hallways, the present students are astonished to witness what's going on. Some of the students identify the student as the delinquent from Class 2B and assume that he probably got hurt while messing around. However, the female students around wonder who the hot teacher is. Ulfheim and Mylene, who accompany him, try to downplay the whole situation, announcing to the students that the delinquent simply fell and passed out. When they get to the school clinic and place the delinquent in the bed, Mylene asks if he has any idea of the situation he just put them in. Shouta replies that it's similar to the one time he tried to take his old man down and got his butt kicked. That's when they realize just how far gone Shouta is from a normal life. All of a sudden, the health attendant arrives with the principal, gasping heavily for breath. They had received reports from numerous students about the situation, so they had to verify it. While the health attendant checks his condition, the principal asks about what happened. Maylin then immediately responds that the student had slipped on a banana peel and passed out from hitting his head on the floor. She explains that Shouta just so happened to find him in that condition, so he had carried him all the way to the clinic by himself. The health attendant then cuts in that the injury doesn't seem like a banana peel-inflicted movie and that they can't fool him. The geezer begins a boring game pep talk about how he has been a nurse for 40 years and how he also happens to have a black belt in karate. He then concludes by stating that the student appears to have been hit with a palm strike by somebody. He turns to Shouta and straight up accuses him, as he looks like someone with martial arts knowledge. The principal, however, is in utter disbelief, hearing the accusation, but he patiently waits for Shouta to deny it. The geezer, however, then presses on, telling Shouta to confess before the student wakes up. Seeing how badly things are turning out, Maylin discreetly communicates with Shouta, telling him this is not the time to be calm, as he could really get fired if the truth comes out. However, Shouta simply responds that there's no need to panic, as he knows it won't turn into a major event. Besides, he believes he'll still be able to protect the target, even if he gets fired. Suddenly, the student wakes up screaming and checking if he's still alive. He then shortly recognizes the environment as the school clinic. When the health attendant asks if Shouta was the one responsible for what happened to him, he considers exposing him, but decides to keep quiet for some reason. The old man interprets his silence as intimidation, so he proceeds to call the police to report the case as assault, but to his surprise, the student stops him. He then tells him he sustained the injury from falling and that they shouldn't make a big deal of it. The attendant believes he's lying, so he tries to press further, but the student snaps and calls him a toothless old geezer, asking him to mind his business. As expected, the geezer's anger gets taken away from the actual incident and targeted at the student's rudeness. While the delinquent walks past Shouta, he whispers that he's going to make him pay for what he did to him. Thanks to the delinquent's unruly behavior, the team manages to clear the air, so they get to leave scot-free. While they head out, Shouta casually mentions how similar delinquents are to mercenaries in the aspect of upholding their reputations. He had taken a gamble on the fact that the delinquent wouldn't want news to get out about him getting ragdolled by a new teacher in school. Hearing this, Ulfheim and Maylin are pretty impressed as they confirm that Shouta is indeed no ordinary mercenary. The team then decides to resume their duty of protecting their princess. On their way, Maylin makes a corny joke, likening their mission to the Mario Brothers, but as expected, Shouta doesn't get it. Meanwhile, a suspicious student is seen stalking Sakurako while thinking to himself that all he has to do is capture her, and then the world can be his. The team eventually finds Sakurako changing her shoes in front of the school locker room, so they realize she's about to head home. Ulfheim, however, voices out his concerns about the Japanese unusual culture of switching shoes when the school clearly has cleaners. But Maylin teases him about it, calling him ignorant. Both of them then get into a squabble as they begin calling each other names. While Sakurako heads out, Shouta notices something unusual, so he orders Ulfheim and Maylin to freeze. He then points out the fact that while the other students are leaving, a particular student seems to be standing still in the locker room. Worse still, he's standing directly behind Sakurako's shoe locker. Meanwhile, the student is seen setting up a peephole under the locker so he can take pictures of Sakurako without anyone getting suspicious. While Shouta tries to call out to him, the creepy student picks up her indoor shoes and begins to sniff them like his life depends on it. Seeing this, although Sakurako is still suspicious, the other two understand the situation, so they ask him to leave the student be. They explain that the student is simply a pervert, popularly known in Japanese as a hentai. As expected, even though the term hentai has now become a globally understood term, Shouta still has no idea about it. While the strange student sniffs the shoes, he imagines himself in a kinky situation where Sakurako is a dominatrix, and he's her slave. Ulfheim explains to the puzzled Shouta that there is just a set of mentally derailed people who steal people's stuff and use them to fantasize about them, without actually talking to them. Shouta, however, refuses to believe that someone that weird exists. He believes the kid has a motive, so he makes up his mind that he's going to interrogate him directly. When Shouta leaves, Maylin wonders if he's going to be okay, but Ulfheim asks her to let him be, as he needs to experience stuff like this to understand the world better. He then instructs her to go after Sakurako and try to befriend her to make things easier. Maylin then takes off, leaving Ulfheim to handle the situation with Shouta so it doesn't get out of hand. While the creepy student walks home, staring at shots he took of Sakurako earlier, Shouta shows up behind him in a disguise and puts a plastic bag over his head. He then instructs him to cooperate with him as long as he wants to make it out alive. The student cooperates, so Shouta takes him into an abandoned warehouse where he straps him to a chair. He then questions the kid rigorously, asking what organization hired him, while threatening him with a piece of broken glass. The kid seems completely clueless, so Shouta lists out a series of well-known organizations, asking which one he belongs to. He then tells the kid that he has killed members of all the top secret organizations and that he won't be an exception if he keeps trying to harm Sakurako. Terrified to death, the kid immediately explains that he's not trying to harm her in any way, but Shouta still doesn't believe him. He accuses the kid of trying to add some poison or explosive compounds to Sakurako's shoes when he was toying with them earlier. But the kid explains that there's no way normal civilians can get stuff like that in modern-day Japan. Still, Shouta decides to take his interrogation to the next level. He tells the boy that he's going to peel the skin of his neck, and that if he flinches, then he's an agent targeting Sakurako, but if he endures it, then he's a high-guts agent with deeper intentions towards her. Hearing his condition, the boy, who was already drenched in bodily fluids, starts to panic even more. Shouta then fakes an attack towards the kid, causing him to piss himself and pass out. From his reaction, he can confirm that the student is not an agent. Shortly after, Ulfheim walks in and thanks Shouta for holding himself back from actually attacking the student. They take the student to a bus stop and leave him there to regain consciousness as they leave. They both then head over to resume Sakurako's protection. Meanwhile, Malin catches up to Sakurako and pretends to be headed her way, but little do they know there's a professional sniper awaiting orders to take a shot at Sakurako. Upon spotting Malin approaching Sakurako, the sniper, who doesn't want to mess up his mission, decides to wait for the perfect shot at his target. Malin, on the other hand, who is oblivious to what's going on, chats with Sakurako, asking about makeup and whatnot. She introduces herself as a foreigner currently studying in Japan. When she hears that Japanese schools don't allow makeup, Malin gets pissed, and she attacks the schooling system for being strict. She then mentions how students overseas can dress and act the way they want and even smoke. Sakurako is stunned by the level of liberty other students have. Unknown to her, she's at the edge of the walkway, so she loses her balance and nearly falls to the road where an incoming vehicle is fast approaching. Thankfully, Ulfheim shows up and saves her from being run over. As a result, Ulfheim gets drenched from the puddle the car had splashed, but he doesn't mind as long as Sakurako is well. Shocked, Sakurako thanks him and apologizes for getting his shirt drenched. To her surprise, Ulfheim winks at her and calls her a princess who almost got her clothes ruined. Sakurako quickly clarifies that she's no princess, but Ulfheim insists that all women are, according to God's decree during the 7 days of creation. He holds her hand and tries to plant a kiss, but Malin, who has been watching him sim over Sakurako, snaps and knocks him out like Chun-Li in Street Fighter. She immediately tells him that kissing someone on the hand isn't allowed in Japan. She attacks Ulfheim's origin, and they argue like cats and dogs. After watching them throw words at each other, Sakurako calls them a funny bunch that bicker like brothers and sisters. The assassins then talk to each other, and Malin learns from Ulfheim that someone had tried targeting Sakurako. Meanwhile, on the rooftop, the sniper has his sight locked on Sakurako, but Shouta shows up and blows his brain out. Shouta then wonders who they are and if they want to capture Sakurako. Later that night, in Sakurako's room, Kane, Sakurako's maid, sees Sakurako sighing over and over, so she asks the girl what the matter is. Sakurako is immediately flustered, but Kane reminds her to call her by name, as her dad had instructed. Sakurako hesitates and does as told, and the angry maid finally calms down. Kane then reminds the girl that she should not forget her pride as the daughter of the Kujo family. The family has been a noble one that has existed since the Heian era. After being scolded, Sakurako asks Kane if she has ever been in love. It takes Kane a while to understand what Sakurako meant, but when she does, she tries talking about how being a part of the Kujo household affects relationships. Sakurako immediately denies being the one in love, but to her surprise, Kane tells her there's no family rule forbidding falling in love with a commoner. Kane tells her that, despite being a maid of the Kujo family, she's a woman first and foremost, and she is an ally to all ladies in love. She holds Sakurako's hands and makes a pinky promise with her while telling her that she supports her decision. Sakurako rejoices after getting an ally, but doesn't hear Kane speak about how the gentleman she expects Sakurako to be in love with is reasonable. The gentleman in question fires some shots at dummies in a practice arena, and it all hits the bullseye. Malin checks the dummies and sees the shots are skewed towards the left, so she asks why it is called a bullseye. Ulfheim shows her a diagram of the human anatomy and tells her the human heart is on the left side. She gets embarrassed and insults Ulfheim for trying to show off. Ulfheim then praises Shouta and tells him he can win a gold medal in the Olympics with the level of his skill. Shouta calls the Olympics an amateur competition that he doesn't want to partake in because he's a pro. He then asks Ulfheim for information regarding the enemy organization, but when Shouta sees his lackluster behavior, Shouta asks for validation on Ulfheim's job. Ulfheim then tells him it's Malin who is their intelligence specialist. They look at her, and as soon as she realizes she's been queried, Malin tells them she's using all her resources but hasn't found any leads. Shouta notes that the organization has the resources to get a sniper. He calls the man he had killed earlier a trained soldier and notes that the sniper rifle isn't a weapon that can casually be brought into Japan. He goes through the photos and notes the weapon's name, the year it was made, and the country that produced it. Ulfheim notes that if it involves a Dragunov, they'd know who is behind it. Maylene takes out an axe and calls him an idiot, because no one sane will walk around the street with a bloody axe. While they bicker, they all conclude that they can't smoke out the organization based on the weapon's origin, and because of that, they can only react to their moves. Shouta turns on the CCTV footage while telling his assistants that they have to continue guarding Sakurako and wait for contact from the last boss. They agree with him, but Ulfheim freaks out after seeing Sakurako changing her outfit. He feasts his eyes and thanks his stars, but suddenly the TV goes off. That's when he sees Maylene holding a pistol and glaring daggers at him. Ulfheim tries to calm her down, but she tells him she's practicing her marksmanship. Immediately, bullets whiz through the air and Ulfheim dodges for his life. While the two are at it, Shouta thinks about how his adoptive father gave him this unclear mission. Unlike other missions, which didn't require much processing power and had clear objectives, the current one's goal is extremely vague. Shouta wonders if all he has to do is just to protect Sakurako, but his troubled mind thinks there might be more to it. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a military squad completes its suppression mission. While the members celebrate, a curious fella amongst them goes looking for the last boss inside the building, and when he sees him, he's confused when he sees the old man staring at the sky. The soldier then speaks to his commander, saying he's lost in thought, and the last boss tells him that he was wondering if the same night sky he's looking at is connected to Japan. That same night, Shouta had a dream about his past. How he was raised by his adoptive father after being found almost at the point of death and trained harshly till he became a pro. By the time Shouta had become an adult, he had earned the name Crimson, which was a result of the blood he made his opponents shed during missions. Back then, Shouta dominated the battlefield with crimson flames, and now he fears that the same flames might one day burn him to ashes. The next morning, he wakes up unclad and decides to do some light workout. Unfortunately for Ulfheim, he walks right into the room without knocking, and as a result, an unforgettable image gets burned into his retina. As he tries to forget what he had just seen, Ulfheim says he'll need to go on a date with 6 different ladies to cleanse his eyes. As Shouta dresses up for school, he asks Ulfheim if he's good at such a mission, and Ulfheim brags about being able to complete it within a day. Curious as to why Ulfheim entered his room, Shouta asks Ulfheim why he's around, and Ulfheim latches onto him before saying that he was worried about him due to the night and day difference between war and Japan. He then urges Shouta to eat breakfast with him before they head to school. Shouta agrees and heads to school after a couple of minutes. In the classroom, he reads an English novel to his students, but the females fawn over him. Maylene sees how bright red Sakurako's face is, so she calls her cute. Meanwhile, one of the male students, named Hideki, gets pissed at Shouta for getting the girls to fall for him. He wishes he were popular because what matters to him isn't looks but how pure a person is. Coincidentally, Fuse glares daggers at the teacher, while Sakurako looks at him with admiration. Later that day in the restroom, Hideki approaches Fuse, and after seeing how angry and hostile the latter is, Hideki tells him he's on his side. Confused, Fuse reminds Hideki that he's a loner, and Hideki accepts, but he then brags about his wealth. Fuse affirms that Hideki is rich, and Hideki tells him that if they combine forces, he can pay the delinquents Fuse can call over and have them beat Shouta up. Fuse thinks about and immediately buys the idea, so they shake hands and ally. Immediately, Fuse contacts delinquents all over the city and promises to pay them for the job, so they hurry over in their vehicles, feeling excited about their mission. The following day, as Sakurako gets down from the bus and walks to school, the students adore her beauty. Meanwhile, in a bus parked not far from their school, Ulfheim and Maylene monitor Sakurako with one of their drones. There, Ulfheim praises Sakurako's beauty, and even Maylene had to stylishly admit that Sakurako is above her. Although her use of grammar gives her a false hope that she stands a chance, Ulfheim breaks her bubble, and they almost get into a fight. Confused, Ulfheim asks why Sakurako acts carelessly because by all standards, she's supposed to be guarded and not walking alone to school. Maylene squarely reminds him that it's the reason they are employed, but Ulfheim reminds her of how powerful people have envoys. Realizing what he means, Maylene then explains that it's Otori Academy's rules that forbid students from commuting to school in vehicles. The school doesn't allow classism, and all classes of society attend. Maylene tells Ulfheim that the school motto is independence and self-reliance, but Ulfheim takes it as an instruction for the rich students to learn from the commoners. Maylene then continues by explaining that Sakurako's dad initially wanted his daughter to attend an all-girls school till university, but the young lady insisted on going to Otori. While watching Sakurako, Ulfheim says she captivates every man around her by walking. Maylene then tells him it's the same for Shouta. They watch Shouta walk to the school and see as many girls fawn over him. Ulfheim stares at the two popular figures and says they could have been a royal couple had they been in a different time. Maylene partly agrees but then notes that trouble always looms whenever a prince and princess fall in love. She instructs Ulfheim to point the drone's camera ahead of Shouta, and when he does that, they see Fuse with a group of delinquents standing in Shouta's way. Fuse mockingly greets Shouta, but Shouta casually replies. The boy gets pissed at his teacher's behavior, but it still stands as a hindrance. Maylene and Ulfheim, who observe through the drone, indirectly call Fuse a caveman for showing up with reinforcements after Shouta had previously floored him. Ulfheim then tells Maylene that there's a problem, and it is that numbers don't matter before the legendary Crimson. Since Shouta got the message, he pulls off his tie and asks Fuse to follow him somewhere quiet. Fuse agrees and they go to the riverbank. There, Fuse cockingly declares that they outnumber Shouta 20-1. He believes Shouta doesn't stand a chance due to the difference in numbers, so he gives the teacher the option to cry and apologize, and that way he may be spared. To their surprise, Shouta gives them the same condition and then reminds them that he wishes they didn't fight because he's their teacher. They laugh at him and conclude that Shouta isn't good at math. With 2 words, Fuse orders the delinquents to fight Shouta. They immediately rush at him, but he folds them and whoops them like it's a walk in the park. The others get terrified as he perfectly knocks down their comrades. They say Shouta isn't human, but Shouta assures them that he is. But he was simply trained on the battlefield. As he strikes most of them down, the others panic and yell that they weren't informed beforehand about how strong Shouta was. Fuse gets mad at them for failing to take down one man, so he yells at the bikers to run Shouta over. One of the delinquents immediately starts his bike and charges right at the English teacher. What happened next shocks everyone watching as they did not expect Shouta to step on the bike and kick off the rider like a ball. He picks the bike up and sits on it. Fuse loses his fuse and yells at the others to attack Shouta, but Shouta shocks him by driving straight at him like a raging bull, but then momentarily stops inches from his face. Fuse sweats buckets and falls to the ground, but still tries to act tough, so Shouta tells him to thank his stars that the Japanese bikes have well-built security systems. The teacher then asks them if they still want to have a go at it or not. On hearing this, the delinquents think about it for a bit before making the wise decision by bidding Fuse farewell and running off. Fuse is shocked by their behavior, so he orders them to come back, but they shut him up and call him a coward for not fighting. The other boys who stick around advise Fuse to give up since they never stood a chance when they were about 20 compared to now. Frustrated, Fuse grits his teeth and then yells at Shouta, calling him a fighter. Shouta calmly replies to him by asking what Fuse wants, then calls him a coward. Fuse then admits that Shouta is good at fighting, but then asks if he has guts. Shouta asks him what he means, and Fuse tells them to settle it with a chicken race. He gets on another bike to challenge Shouta in the game, whereby the first person to apply the brakes between them as they drive towards the wall loses. Maylene gets mad after seeing Shouta agree to such a ridiculous game, so she asks Ulfheim to connect her to him. Immediately as the connection is made, she asks him if he seriously wants to take up the challenge, and Shouta affirms. She then asks him if he's dumb because he can easily solve the matter by beating them to a pulp. She then asks him what he'll do if, by some chance, he loses the chicken race. Shouta plans to find out when he crosses the bridge. With that, he disconnects the audio. Maylene yells at Ulfheim, saying that Shouta has violated orders. She worries about what the boss will say if he finds out. Maylene then asks Ulfheim to turn back the audio, but to her surprise, he refuses. She snaps at him and hits him for being so stupid, but Ulfheim tells her that Shouta would never lose. The day Shouta knocked out Fuse when the brat tried attacking him, Shouta carried the boy back to the infirmary. Then, Ulfheim had asked Shouta why he was being too nice to the boy, so Shouta narrated how he had a soldier much younger than him join his unit when he was fighting in the jungles of South America. Despite the boy being very young, Shouta and the last boss had allowed him to participate in the war because the boy needed to feed his family. Back then, Shouta had grown close to the boy and tried teaching him Japanese. Unfortunately, the day after he taught the boy how to say goodbye in Japanese, the little soldier was killed in action. Now, the reason Shouta had decided to help Fuse was that he looked just like the fallen little soldier. As Ulfheim watches them about to race, he sees Shouta smiling after being trash-talked by Fuse, and notes that Shouta might be better suited as a teacher than a mercenary. Rain starts falling at the venue, and as they rev their bike, preparing for the race. The referee announces that they are to take off as soon as the can he throws hits the ground. Maylene has a bad feeling about the race, but Ulfheim calms her down by saying Shouta is a teacher after all. She refuses and says he's just a legendary mercenary. Still, Ulfheim supports Shouta and tells her that Shouta might become a legendary teacher. Curious, he anticipates the outcome of the race. A few seconds later, the referee throws the empty can into the air, and as soon as it lands, the bike riders kick off. Shouta outpaces him and accelerates towards the wall. Fuse also picks up speed, and it has his henchmen worry about him. Still, Shouta doesn't waver and doesn't reduce his speed despite the wall getting closer than ever. Seeing this, Malin freaks out, knowing that if they crash into the wall at that pace, Fuse will die. Ulfheim, on the other hand, commends Fuse for being gutsy, but Malin worries about Shota's teaching career because if he gets Fuse killed, that'll be the end for him. Ulfheim, on the other hand, says that can only happen if Shouta abandons the boy, but he is sure Shouta won't do such a thing. As they approach the wall, Shouta glances at Fuse and sees the boy risk his all just to save his face in school. At the last minute, Fuse applies his brakes out of fear of being turned into mashed cheese, and immediately Shouta intervenes by leaping off his bike and saving the boy. He acts as a meat shield while falling to the ground and protects Fuse from being grazed. The bikes, on the other hand, slam into the wall. Shouta then gets up after sustaining an injury on his forehead and asks Fuse out of concern if he's okay. Fuse wakes up and sees he's safe, so he assesses the situation and realizes that Shouta had saved him. Shouta observes him and relaxes after seeing that Fuse isn't hurt, so he walks away. Utterly confused, Fuse asks Shouta why he saved him, and Shouta should have left him alone. Shouta then realizes that the reason Fuse has been acting this way is that he is always alone. The boy grits his teeth from the impact of Shouta's words and tells Shouta not to pity him. Fuse then recalls how his parents didn't care for him, and he had to fend for himself in such a lonely world. Shouta approaches him and tells him that in the world he knows, children aren't left alone because they are also valuable combat assets and labor forces. He explains to Fuse that he has lived in a world where a child's life is as light as a feather, but it's a problem for Fuse, who hasn't reached out to all these while. With that, Shouta stretches his hand at Fuse, and the boy is shocked to see someone show concern about him. Shouta then tells Fuse that he isn't alone, and if he ever feels like lashing out or getting pissed off at something, he should come to him. And if it's a fight, he'll take Fuse in as many times as he wants. The boy bursts into tears, and then shakes Shouta, agreeing. At this point, Malin admits she's amazed by Shota's hot bloodiness. She agrees, just like Ulfheim, that Shouta isn't acting out of character. Outside, as Shouta and Fuse leave the riverbank, Fuse confirms that Shouta just moved to their town, so he offers to lend a hand to Shouta in case he needs anything. Shouta agrees by using weird terminology, and the boy struggles to grasp what he's saying. Malin then realizes that their organization has to clean up the mess Shouta and Fuse had made. Worst of all, she's the one in charge. As the males walk back to school, Hideki stares at them from afar and curses Fuse for being a coward. He changes his mind and vows to get Shouta expelled from their academy. A few days later, Hideki hugs and tries to kiss the portrait of Sakurako in his room. Suddenly, his housemaids come into his room to clean it up after informing him beforehand. He quickly covers her portrait and looks very embarrassed due to almost being discovered. He then yells at them for entering his room without his permission and threatens to have them fired. He orders the old ladies to leave his room, and as soon as they leave, they continue their cleaning elsewhere while talking about how the lord of the house will be pissed if they don't clean Hideki's room. Another maid tells her not to worry because the geezer is always so busy with work that he rarely comes home, and when he even comes home, he always heads straight for the villa in Izu where he polishes his favorite vase. Just like they have said, Hideki's dad currently admires his vase, which he calls Kakimon, a national treasure. Meanwhile, the maids are fed up with Hideki's behavior because he does whatever he likes since he's spoiled with money. He even orders food when the maids could have made one for him. Pissed at their nagging, Hideki calls them lowlifes who shouldn't tell him how he gets to spend his allowance. They stare at him judgmentally and vow to ensure their children don't turn out like him. 1 week later, Sakurako plays the piano during music class, and the entire class applauds her. Ulfheim and Malin confirm there are no abnormalities on Sakurako's front as usual. They talk about how nothing has happened since the sniper incident, and it's been peaceful ever since. Curious, Malin asks Ulfheim what Shouta has been up to since she hasn't seen him since morning. Ulfheim then reports to her that Shouta is getting chewed out by the principal. Malin leaves the music room after hearing that Principal Tazaki has summoned Shouta. Meanwhile, at the principal's office, Tazaki tells Shouta that there's a troubling case against him. Shouta, as usual, acts strictly and rigidly around the principal like he's talking to a colonel. He asks the principal what he did, and Tazaki shows him photos of him clobbering the delinquents by the riverbank. Shouta simply calls it a photo from the extracurricular lesson they had the other day, and he doesn't see any problem with it. Tazaki then tells him the photos were distributed to the PTA. Oblivious to what that stands for, Shouta compares it to NATO, thinking it's the Asian version, but Tazaki explains that it's the Parent-Teacher Association. Still oblivious to what it is, Shouta relaxes, but the principal tells him not to underestimate PTA because it currently holds more power than the principal. The news hits Shouta like a cannon because the principal, whom he holds high like a colonel, is powerless against the PTA. The man then tells him about the PTA president, Mrs. Ushijima, who is the wife of a prefectural assembly member. As Shouta relates to their power based on a democratic nation, Tazaki shows him a mysterious letter, circulating for Shouta's dismissal, or else they'll leak the video footage of his fights with students to the web. Realizing it can jeopardize his mission, Shouta decides to look into the case. He is sure that Fuse can't snitch to the PTA, so he believes there's a third party who helped Fuse gather the group back then. Shouta suspects the third person and assures the principal that he'll get to the bottom of the case. After the meeting, Shouta meets with his teammates and relays the information to them. By then, Sakurako had gone home early for her lessons. Before long, Mrs. Ushijima circulates papers of Shouta beating up students. She blots out his eyes, as if that's enough to help counter defamation. Curious, Ulfheim asks Shouta how he plans to solve the case after seeing how relaxed Shouta looks. Maylene thinks otherwise, so she asks him for his plan against the PTA. The clueless militant then calls the PTA the academic variant of NATO, but his teammates realize that he doesn't know what a PTA is. Ulfheim tells him that the PTA is an auditing body that watches over the school's order. Upon hearing him, Shouta relaxes and tells them that there's no problem because he's on the side that corrects the order. Ulfheim asks for an explanation. Shouta tells him that he was simply giving the kids some educational guidance. Maylene doesn't fully agree with him, and she reminds him that there were lots of injuries. She tells him it isn't some hot-blooded teacher drama, and they aren't in that kind of era anymore. Ulfheim then tells her that he simply has to create Shouta's era. They talk back and forth till Ulfheim asks her if she's gotten the intel on who is behind the whole incident. Maylene smirks and affirms she has found the culprit. She shows them photos of Hideki Mogi, a rich bozo who set up the whole ordeal and filmed it to try to trap Shouta. Ulfheim asks for Hideki's motive, and Maylene tells him that Hideki has a crush on Sakurako, so he must have hated Shouta, who is popular with the ladies. Ulfheim sees how troublesome the situation is because he can't get to correct Hideki like the usual delinquents, since the boy will hold a grudge against him if he tries it. Maylene agrees with him but notes that they have to solve the case. They ponder on the matter, and to their surprise, Shouta, who has been quietly reading through a report, closes the book and tells them he can solve the problem within 1 or 2 days. They curiously ask him for the details, and he tells them. That same evening, Hideki confronts Fuse for failing to get rid of Shouta despite paying him handsomely. He gets mad at Fuse for wagging his tail at the teacher, but Fuse tells him that Shouta isn't a bad guy. Hearing Fuse speak positively about the teacher makes Hideki furious, so he tells Fuse to snap out of it and tells him they aren't in a soap opera. Hideki then shows Fuse the article he had published and says it's only about time before Shouta gets fired. Fuse looks at the article and then tells Hideki that it's pointless to talk to him. He pats him on the shoulder, and as he walks away, he tells Hideki that he hopes he can change someday, and when that time happens, they should go to the arcade together. Hideki stomps his foot angrily after hearing Fuse back out and calls the boy a coward. He calls Fuse a pauper who is just after his wallet. Left alone, Hideki notes that everyone is dancing to Shouta's tune because of his good face, so he plans to make the teacher taste hell. Later that night, the 3 agents drive through the city in a disguise, and they have Hideki, who is in tears, bound and gagged. A few hours earlier, the agents met not quite far from the school gate while dressed up as burglars, and they patiently waited for Hideki to leave the school compound. Around that time, Mrs. Ushijima had distributed all the flyers regarding Shouta, but she noticed that the students didn't buy them, and they claim the photos there were edited or made by someone who was clearly jealous of the teacher. The students brush off the matter, believing it's fake, and carry on with their lives. Meanwhile, as Hideki leaves the compound, he gets pissed that his plan isn't working, so he tries to contact a marketing firm to spread the video of Shouta's fight with the delinquents. While at it, he doesn't realize when a black van tails him before pulling over, and within seconds he's bundled and threatened to follow them quietly as a hostage for negotiations with his father, else he'll end up with a broken nose. With that, they hurl him into the vehicle and drive into the night, and after a long while, they arrive at an abandoned warehouse where Hideki's limbs are bound, and he's strapped. The boy wakes up shortly, and after the tape sealing his mouth falls off, he yells at his kidnappers to free him instantly, threatening them that he'll have his father lock them up thanks to the old man's connection with the higher-ups in the police force. To his surprise, a screen turns on right in front of him, and on it, the time value of over 3 hours starts counting down. Hideki then yells about how he's expected to be at home, and once his dad finds out, they will be finished, but a voice replies that his father never paid attention to him. Instead, he wonders if the old man probably values his precious antiques over his son, and this pisses Hideki off. The voice continues taunting the boy, reminding him that the lack of parental affection is why his personality is twisted, and that's why his old man won't be aware that he's in danger. Hideki continues to refute them, insisting that his dad will know, but Shouta, who has been the one speaking, informs Hideki that they have contacted the old man by sending him a picture of him being tied up. The demand is for the geezer to bring 3 precious antiques, ranging from the precious white porcelain from the Chinese Ming dynasty, another from the Korean Yi dynasty, and lastly the Japanese Kakeyamon orb pot. Once Hideki hears it's his old man's precious secret collection, which is valued at 600 million yen. He has second thoughts about his old man coming to save him. Shouta then shows up and wagers if Hideki's old man will show up before the time elapses because it'll mean that the rich heir must have left his office early to go to Izu to get the item before rushing down to the location. After 3 hours, Shouta teases Hideki about how Hideki's confidence has vanished, but the boy yells at him to shut up. They wait. And when the timer hits a minute left, a vehicle drifts into the location, and Hideki's dad shows up looking for his son. The boy is immediately overwhelmed with joy upon seeing his father, and to his surprise, Shouta takes off his mask, revealing his face. Once Hideki realizes it's Shouta, he speaks rudely to him, but Shouta reminds the boy that he is still his teacher. Hideki then asks if it's okay for a teacher to act like a terrorist, and Shouta tells him that it's been that way since ancient times for teachers and doctors to be terrorists and revolutionaries. The boy then tells Shouta that he'll get fired, but Shouta brings out a knife and tells him to quiet down. The teacher educates Hideki on how freedom of speech is something earned from those in power through violence, so if Hideki wants to speak freely, he'll have to fight for his freedom, just like the French Revolution. Meanwhile, Mogi sees Hideki, and as he approaches the boy, Shouta reveals his knife and points it at Hideki while commending Mogi for showing up alone just as ordered. Mogi then tries to reassure Hideki that everything will be alright because he brought the antiques as instructed. Suddenly, Mei-Lin shows up with a tray and tells Mogi to line the antiques, and she advises him not to try anything funny, so he brings out the antiques as ordered and then asks Shouta to quickly pick one of them in exchange for Hideki. Shouta first starts by asking him which of the antiques is the most expensive. Mogi then tries to fool him after realizing that Shouta doesn't know the value, so he picks the smallest vase, but unfortunately, Mei-Lin sees through him and reveals that the value of pottery depends on the size. Having been caught, Mogi grabs the Chinese antique and confesses that it's the most expensive. Shouta then shocks him by throwing him a pipe and requesting that he smash the vase into pieces. Mogi grabs the pipe and complains to Shouta about how the vase is worth more than 100 million, but Shouta reminds him that the vase belongs to him the moment it got there, and he can request how it should be treated. Mogi grits his teeth as he lifts the pipe, then he tells Shouta that the god of art will curse him to death. Shouta simply replies that he's already surrounded by dozens of reapers, so adding one more isn't a problem. He hurries Mogi up, and the old man smashes the precious item to pieces. Hideki feels for his father, but the old man walks closer to Shouta while demanding Hideki. Unexpectedly, Shouta takes out a gun and accuses Mogi of claiming to fulfill his promise when he used fakes as bargaining chips. He shatters the remaining vases with bullets, and Hideki is shocked that Shouta has a real gun. Shouta then reveals that his team had investigated beforehand about Mogi owning fakes for theft prevention purposes and suspected that Mogi would bring the fakes. Mogi then admits to it, saying that he cannot hand them over because the works of art can't be recreated, and Shouta won't understand just how valuable they are. Shouta then wonders if they are more valuable than Hideki, so he snaps his fingers, and the TV station comes on. There, Mogi sees Ulfheim entering his special art room with a forged key, and he's surprised that Ulfheim got his way in. Shouta then declares that he'll hurt Hideki's fingers one by one until Mogi orders Ulfheim to break everything. Still, Mogi adamantly says he cannot agree to such terms. Shouta then proves how serious he is by instructing Ulfheim to shatter the antiques, and in one swing, Ulfheim breaks a lot of them to pieces. Shouta then holds one of Hideki's fingers and snaps it like a twig to serve as an example. Immediately, the boy screams from the sharp pain, but Shouta tells him not to make a fuss because they are just getting started. Mogi screams at Shouta to stop, but Shouta asks him one more, which is more important between his son's finger or his prized collection. Mei-Lin, who watches the entire scene, notes that she feels bad about it even though it's not her plan. Shouta gives Ulfheim the signal, and Ulfheim selects a pot. But Mogi immediately screams how the Chinese emperor loved the pot more than his concubines. Seeing how attached Mogi is to the pot, Shouta offers to pull out Hideki's fingernail for the pot to remain untouched. Hideki fears that once he sees his insane sensei with a pair of pliers, so he screams for help. To Hideki's surprise, Mogi says the pot costs 80 million yen, and he'll offer to buy him anything he wants if he endures losing a fingernail. After all, it'll eventually grow back. Upon hearing this, Hideki realizes he's finished, and Shouta confirms his fear by plucking out his nail and causing the boy to scream. Realizing how stubborn Mogi is, Shouta asks him if he knows what May 27th is, but Mogi has no clue, so Shouta informs him that it's Hideki's birthday. He tells the old crone how Hideki spends his birthdays eating cake alone every year, then he instructs Ulfheim to pick the next item. Ulfheim selects another pot, and Shouta gives Mogi the option to spare Hideki's finger for the pot, but Mogi says the pot costs 120 million yen. Shouta nearly gives up on the geezer, but then asks him if he likes Zenkoji Temple. Confused, Mogi replies that he has no feelings for the place, but then Shouta reminds him of how Hideki was once moved by the temple when he visited the place during a family trip, which opens once in every 7 years, and Hideki had wished to go with Mogi again. Shouta then informs Mogi that the temple will open up next week. He breaks another finger and looks at Mogi disdainfully, noting that the man's love for antic and profits has gone far. The next object Shouta brings out is a metal sledgehammer, and he plans to crush Hideki's finger with it. He says the fingers can recover from the previous torture method, but there's no reset for a crushed finger. Fearing for his life, Hideki begs Shouta to stop, but Shouta tells him to beg Mogi instead, so the boy turns to his father and begs him. And in that moment, Mogi offers to pay a ransom of 100 million yen to free Hideki. Shouta sees that Mogi is softening a bit, but then tells him he doesn't want his money. Instead, he hands Mogi a book to read and tells Mogi that if the pot is still more important after reading the book, then he'll smash Hideki's fingers. Shouta then raises the sledgehammer on Hideki, but Mogi tells him to wait and jumps to cover Hideki in the last second, crying and declaring that he doesn't need the pots anymore, and Shouta should give Hideki back to him. Surprised, Hideki asks Mogi why, since Mogi had insisted that the pot was more important than his own life, and Mogi doesn't change his stance on the matter, but then he says that the pot cannot replace Hideki. With that finally out of the way, Ulfheim smashes all the antiques, and Shouta releases Hideki. Mogi then rushes to him and apologizes, but Hideki still doesn't understand why the old man has a change of heart, so Shouta explains that Mogi had read Hideki's childhood essay where Hideki had admired his father and wished to inherit and uphold his legacy by making the man's construction company the #1 in the world. Mogi hugs Hideki while admitting that he was so absorbed in work that he forgot what's most important to him. He notes that there's no collection of money that can replace a human life and the precious time he had with his son. At that point, Hideki gets moved and bawls his eyes out so the family's bond is reunited. Lastly, Shouta leaves the place, noting that his mission has been accomplished. The following week, Hideki and Mogi visit the Zenkoji temple together, and Mogi thanks Shouta for making him realize that there are things money cannot buy. Meanwhile, Shouta and the rest watch from their RC drone, and Ulfheim notes that Shouta doesn't look like the type to break his student's finger. Maylene immediately insults him for not thinking deeply, then she throws him a mannequin pair with an inbuilt electric shock. Maylene had hurriedly built the mannequin that was worn over Hideki's arm, and the exact moment Shouta snaps or ruins the mannequin, Hideki is shocked. Ulfheim notes that under tension, almost anyone in Hideki's situation would mistake a small electric shock for their own hand. Maylin then worries about how Ulfheim had gone too far smashing the antiques, but Ulfheim reminds her that he's a fine art teacher and all he simply did was make fake footage, so in the end, nobody was hurt. With that out of the way, Maylin asks Shouta for her reward for helping him with his plan, so he asks her for the amount she wants transferred to her account. When she tells him she doesn't want dollars, Shouta lists out other currencies and values he can send to her, but she tells him she's not interested in any of that but entertainment. He immediately thinks about a vacation, but Maylene, who likes the sound of it, tells him she wants to see him go on a date with a girl. The dunce still doesn't get it, so Ulfheim explains in plain terms, saying that it's time for Shouta to go on a date with Sakurako. Shouta then asks them why they want him to go on a date with his protection target, but they tell him that it seems fun. Since they helped him out with his plan, Shouta agrees to theirs, and Maylene giggles like she's watching a peak soap opera. She calls him the great mercenary teacher, and for once, she and Ulfheim are on the same page. After Maylin takes her leave, Ulfheim tells Shouta that Maylin isn't bringing up the case just for entertainment purposes, but also for them to probe the enemy since the last boss doesn't have much intel on them and cannot act. Shouta tells Ulfheim that he's aware of that part, but he has never been on a date before, so he doesn't know what to do. Shocked, Ulfheim asks Shouta if he has had 1 or 2 romantic experiences, but Shouta says he's had intense attacks on the battlefield. Ulfheim tries to explain it in simple terms by asking if Shouta has played around with a woman, so Shouta recalls meeting a girl during a civil war zone in a terrorist village, and he taught her how to disassemble an assault rifle. Ulfheim nearly facepalms as he sees that Shouta is a lost cause for flopping his chance back then, so he hands Shouta a lot of romance manga, novels, and magazines before explaining to him that romance is just like war because the one who controls information controls the world. Shouta goes through the magazine and learns from Ulfheim that he's to take girls there if on a date, but Sakurako is a wealthy girl who must have experienced all the romantic spots, which is why Ulfheim offers to plan the event himself. He instructs Shouta to send a letter to Sakurako, asking her to meet him in front of Hachiko. On hearing Hachiko, Shouta says he knows the legendary Japanese dog that symbolizes the samurai spirit. The following day after closing hours, Maylin hands Sakurako a letter from Shouta, and when Sakurako reads it, she blushes as she sees he has instructed them to meet in front of Hachiko. Later that day, she stands outside the place and looks around for Shouta, but cannot find him. Meanwhile, the dunce is at the Ueno Museum staring at the taxidermy of the loyal dog. All the females in the museum fall for Shouta, who has been standing there for a long time, and he notes that Sakurako is late.